Okay, a break from the current fluffy content, but this story is just so bizarre and surreal, I just couldn't resist. It's all about Allison Pearson, and it just gets weirder and weirder, so please stick around. First of all, who's Allison Pearson? She is, in case you don't know, a journalist who writes for Inter Alia, to use a bit of Latin, the Telegraph. But you may have seen in the press that she was visited by the police in regards to a non-crime hate incident. In other words, it was about a tweet she had sent over a year ago that they said was racist, or at least could stir up racial hatred. But they wouldn't tell her what the tweet was or any details about that. And she went public with this, obviously, and said, it's all very Orwellian and the police coming up and what is a non-crime hate incident. I mean, just so you know, a non-crime hate incident, as the name suggests, it's something where the police say, well, it doesn't amount to a crime, but we think it's hateful anyway, so we've come to give you a ticking off. I mean, she stuck to her guns and just said, I'm not going to cooperate. You can, if you think there's a crime, you can interview me. Call me at the police station, the solicitor, full disclosure of what the offence is and all that. Not a lot came about that, apart from the police have complained to Ipso. That's like the old Press Complaints Commission, except it's got a new name now. And they have said it was unethical of her in the way that she has reported on this story. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens there, especially bearing in mind what I am about to tell you. Ipso itself, by the way, it's a voluntary organisation. It's made up of editors and journalists from newspapers. It's self-regulation, and indeed not all newspapers and media outlets are in fact members of Ipso, but they have a code of conduct and they advise their members on how to behave in stories and when reporting, and they can order their members, or at least advise them, to sort of make apologies and reparations where necessary. I mean, I'll follow that story. But what was the actual offensive tweet? Well, The Guardian seemed to have tracked it down, and the tweet was this. And if I remember, what I will do is I'll lean to one side and post it up there so that you can see for yourself what it is. And feel free to pause if I'm talking too quickly. But the tweet was, the police somebody had posted a picture, and it shows some police officers stood around with some other people holding a flag. And Anne Allison Pearson, and notice here Anne Allison Pearson said, "How dare they at Met Police UK? Invited to pose for a photo with lovely peaceful British friends of Israel on Saturday, police refused. Look at this lot smiling with the Jew haters." Now there's a couple of issues there. First of all, it wasn't the Met Police, it was Manchester Police. But what did the tweet mean? In what way was it offensive? I mean, I suppose the assumption is that this is somebody thinking it was like a pro-Palestinian or pro-Hamas, thing. But this was actually taken quite some time ago. And it was taken on the event of Pakistan Independence Day. And the flag itself, it's not, a Palestinian flag or a Hamas flag or anything like that. It's actually the flag of one of the Pakistani political parties. And now I was able to recognise this myself because of my extensive knowledge of flags and the fact it actually says Pakistan on the flag itself. It's actually the party that was started by Imran Khan. I mean, that's another reason I know this, because as a Bradford boy, Pakistan is my cricket team. Do you remember that Pad and Max series, the one that was the follow-up to Phoenix Nights? I mean, what I loved about that was the fact that Paddy is actually wearing a Pakistan cricket shirt, because that is such a northern thing to do. I won't get into the politics of it, but it's all to do with the England test selectors and their bias against all people from posh counties. But that's probably by the by. So people say, well, she's got this wrong. How stupid of her sort of saying this. And it's obviously clearly offensive. Now, is it offensive? Well, it's a tricky one really, because generally speaking, accusations of, disliking a particular ethnic group and stuff, they're not necessarily actionable themselves, because she's not saying she dislikes a group, she's saying these particular people, are Jew haters. But who's she speaking about? Is she referring to the police because they didn't to have a similar photograph taken with Friends of Israel, or is she referring to the people in the photograph? Which, of course, it could be highly defamatory against either of them. However, it's over a year old, so the limitation for defamation is 12 months anyway, so nobody could actually sue about this anyway. I mean, the thing is, in the photograph, everybody's smiling. So it's like, who was she talking about? Well, even if she was talking about the people holding the flag, I mean, it could be highly defamatory to accuse somebody of, effectively anti-Semitism or racism. But, probably wouldn't amount to a criminal offence. They might have been able to sue for defamation, but they didn't, and that's all water under the bridge. However, this is where it gets interesting, because, people have written articles about this, including The Guardian, going, this is the tweet, and this is why she's a terrible person, and all this sort of thing. It's the wrong Allison Pearson. It's not the journalist. It's some other lass who just happens to be called Allison Pearson. So this throws up all sorts of interesting things, because does the journalist Allison Pearson now have any sort of cause of action? Can she bring a defamation claim? Well, you might think, well, they weren't aiming at her, they got the wrong person, so it can't be defamatory. However, there is a well-known case in defamation law, the case of Artemus Jones. And what happened there was, this is all back in olden days, like back in the 30s. A magazine published a spoof article about a Mr. Artemus Jones who had gone on holiday with a lady who was not his wife. And they said, oh, what are they doing? Maybe it's this, that, or the other. Implying they were up to sort of, illicit shenanigans. But, it was just a little bit of a joke article. Problem was, there was a real Artemus Jones, who in fact was himself a solicitor. And he sued for defamation. He said, can you imagine the embarrassment, apart from anything else, my real wife saw this. But, I am a well-respected person in the legal profession. And indeed he was. He went on actually to be a very, very senior judge. And he sued. And he was successful in that, because it is not a defence to say, we didn't mean to defame you, we're actually commenting about a different person. I mean, here it gets much more complicated, because clearly they thought, we were targeting you, but it's somebody else who's done the wrongdoing. And this is why you always have to be very careful, actually, if you're ever writing a fiction or something like that. You've got to be very, very careful to make sure the names that you use, especially names of companies, aren't real names. Because if you put something in there that could be defamatory, people might say, well, that is either meant to be me or people think it might be me. And I am, I pass all the tests for defamation. People thought it was me, and as a result, I suffered serious harm, etc. There is that old joke in defamation that you should always, if you actually want to write about somebody using a different name, but based on a real person. So you say, this is a work of fiction, but it's actually clearly not. You're just saying allegations about a real person. That you always put something in there like they are not very well endowed. Because then very few people will come forward and say, haha, you said that this person who is totally rubbish in bed is, and that's clearly meant to be me. I mean, that's the sort of spoof advice. Whether or not anybody actually really does that, I am not aware of anybody. But you do have to be very, very careful here. But yeah, I mean, so, does the journalist Allison Pearson have a claim? Potentially so, really, because if she can show she has suffered serious harm, I mean, and it would have, I mean, this is where it might get into problems, because she'd have to show as a result of this, she had suffered serious harm. And the mere fact people have commented in the newspapers and accused her of stuff, unless that has somehow detrimentally, affected her career, or people are now shunning and avoiding her or anything like that. There are definitely some hurdles there. She's almost certainly got a complaint, to The Guardian. But then again, it might not go anywhere, because they'll just say, we were just going with what the police, we're just reporting on the police incident. But it's the fact that they said, this is the tweet, and they have identified her as the author of the tweet. That's where they're probably going to get into problems. What about the police themselves? Well, again, yeah, this is probably worth, a complaint to the police conduct authority, because, sort of turning up on somebody's doorstep and accusing them of something. I mean, it started off very Kafkaesque, didn't it? Because of, not telling her what she was actually accused of. I suppose it's even more Kafkaesque now that they got the wrong person. somebody must have been telling lies about Allison because one day he was arrested, to misquote the book. I've tried to read that book so many times. You know, it's on that list of books all lawyers should read, but I just find it completely impenetrable. I quite like the film with the guy who played Psycho, whatever it's called, the really good actor, because he said he actually played it as if Joseph K was guilty. So, you know, that's an interesting take on it. But anyway, as always, hope you found this vaguely interesting, vaguely entertaining and vaguely accurate. I'll see where this goes, because I think this story might run and run and run, because it just gets, like I say, it just gets more surreal by the second. Oh, and as people asked where the boys were, Lord Loverduck, he's still with us. Say hello. And Cappy Barrister is still there. And the boys send their love to everybody. Cappy's, like myself, he's in his civvies now, because we're taking a bit of time off. But yeah, I'll follow this story and I will keep you updated, and I'll be going back to our fluffy content later, because I've got quite an interesting story about when is It's an Art Project a defence to a trademark infringement and defamation claim, and also when is It's an Art Project a defence to terrorism.